6 black teens disappeared after a beach party. 12 weeks later, police finds their last clue. The bonfire crackled against the summer night, casting dancing shadows across the faces of Brantford Bay's newest graduates. Malik Thompson adjusted his cap backward and grinned at his 5 best friends, knowing this moment would live in his memory forever. At 18, he felt invincible sitting on this stretch of beach with Lena, Tasha, Bria, Dion, and Andre, the tight-knit group that had survived 4 years of high school together. "Can you believe we actually made it?" Lena Williams laughed, her voice carrying over the gentle crash of waves. She pulled her knees to her chest, the firelight reflecting off her dark skin as she gazed at the others. "Remember freshman year when Mrs. Peterson said half of us wouldn't graduate? That old bat," Tasha muttered, tossing a piece of driftwood into the flames. "Joke's on her. We're all heading to college in the fall." The beach party had been going strong since sunset, but now, past midnight, most of their classmates had drifted home. Only a few stragglers remained scattered along the shoreline, their laughter echoing faintly in the distance. The 6 friends had claimed their usual spot near the old pier, where they'd spent countless summer evenings over the years. Bria Santos stretched her arms above her head and yawned. "This is perfect. Just us, no drama, no teachers breathing down our necks." She wore a bright yellow sundress that seemed to glow in the firelight, her curly hair catching the ocean breeze. Dion Rivers, the quietest of the group, had been sketching in his notebook throughout the evening. He looked up now, his pencil still moving across the page. "I'm gonna miss this. All of this." His words carried a weight that made the others pause. Andre Jackson, ever the joker, jumped to his feet and struck a dramatic pose. "Don't get all sentimental on us, D. We've got the whole summer before we scatter to the 4 winds." He grabbed Malik's shoulder. "Besides, we promised we'd always stay in touch, right?" "Right." Malik nodded, but something in his chest tightened. Change was coming whether they wanted it or not. Lena was headed to Spelman, Tasha to Howard, Bria to a community college in California. They'd all be hundreds of miles apart in just a few months. The fire began to die down, and the night grew cooler. Other partygoers packed up their blankets and coolers, calling out goodbyes as they headed toward the parking lot. Soon, the beach would be empty except for the 6 friends and the endless stretch of dark water before them. "Hey," Tasha said suddenly, her eyes bright with an idea. "Remember when we were kids and we used to take that old ferry across the bay to the boardwalk?" "Oh man, that rickety old thing," Andre chuckled. "My mom would have finished me if she knew we were riding that death trap." "It wasn't that bad," Lena protested. "And the boardwalk on the other side had the best funnel cake in the county." Bria's face lit up. "Is that place still there? The one with all the carnival games and the haunted house that wasn't scary at all?" "I think so," Malik said, though he wasn't entirely sure. They hadn't been to Old Harbor Point in years, not since they'd started driving and could reach better beaches along the coast. Dion looked up from his sketch pad. "You know what? We should go. One last time. Like a final adventure before everything changes." The suggestion hung in the air for a moment. The logical part of Malik's brain pointed out that it was already past midnight, that they all had to work tomorrow, that their parents would worry. But the sentimental part, the part that wasn't ready to let go of childhood, found the idea irresistible. "The ferry doesn't run this late," Tasha pointed out practically. "Actually," Andre said slowly, "I heard Tommy Martinez say something about night rides. Some old guy who runs trips for people who know to ask." Lena raised an eyebrow. "That sounds sketchy as hell." "Come on," Bria said, jumping to her feet. "We're 18. We can handle a little adventure. Besides, what's the worst that could happen?" The question would haunt their families for months to come. Malik felt a strange mix of excitement and unease as they gathered their things. The beach felt different now, darker, quieter, as if the ocean itself was holding its breath. The remaining partygoers had disappeared, leaving only the 6 friends and the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. "One last ride," he said, echoing Dion's words. "For old time's sake." They walked toward the docks, their footsteps muffled by the sand. Behind them, the dying embers of their bonfire cast long shadows that seemed to reach toward the water. None of them looked back. At the dock, they found exactly what Andre had described, an older man with weathered hands and kind eyes, willing to take them across the bay for $50 cash. He didn't ask questions, and they didn't offer explanations. Within minutes, they were aboard a small ferry that looked far sturdier than the tourist boats that ran during the day. As Brantford Bay's lights grew distant behind them, the six friends stood at the rail, breathing in the salt air and feeling the weight of endings and beginnings. Malik pulled out his phone to take a picture, but the screen showed no signal. The time read 12:47 a.m. None of them would ever be seen again. 12 weeks. 84 days of empty bedrooms, unanswered phone calls, and a silence so loud it echoed through every corner of Brantford Bay. The small coastal town had never experienced anything like this, 6 kids vanishing without a trace, as if the earth had simply swallowed them whole. Detective Ray Morrison sat at his desk, staring at the case file that had consumed his life for nearly 3 months. 6 folders, 6 smiling graduation photos, 6 families demanding answers he didn't have. The Coast Guard had searched for days. Divers had combed the bay floor. Search and rescue teams had covered every inch of shoreline between Brantford Bay and Old Harbor Point. Nothing. Still working the impossible case? Officer Janet Mills asked, setting a coffee cup on his desk. She'd been Morrison's partner for 8 years, long enough to recognize the look of a man chasing ghosts. Their phones all went dead at the same time, Morrison muttered, not looking up from the files. 12:47 a.m., right in the middle of the bay. Then nothing. No distress calls, no messages, no social media posts. 6 teenagers who lived on their phones, and they all just stopped. Mills pulled up a chair. She'd heard this speech before, but she also knew Morrison wouldn't rest until he found answers. What about the ferry angle? Anyone operating that night? That's just it. Brantford Bay Ferry Company shut down at sunset. Their logs show no boats in the water after 9 p.m. Morrison rubbed his temples. But witnesses saw them heading toward the docks. Sarah Chin from the beach party swears she saw them talking to someone near the ferry landing. The case had split the town down the middle. Half the residents whispered about those kids being reckless, getting mixed up in drugs or running away to avoid responsibility. The other half, mostly families with teenagers of their own, knew better. These weren't troubled kids. They were honor students, athletes, kids with college scholarships and bright futures. But whispers had a way of growing in small towns, especially when fear needed somewhere to land. At the weekly town council meeting, tensions finally boiled over. Morrison watched from the back as parents faced off across the community center's folding chairs. Maybe they just wanted a fresh start somewhere else, suggested Harold Brennan, owner of the local hardware store. Kids today, they see too much on the internet. Think the grass is greener somewhere else. Malik's mother, Patricia Thompson, stood up slowly. Her eyes were rimmed with red from months of sleepless nights. My son had a full scholarship to Georgia Tech. His bags were packed for college. You think he just decided to throw that away? I'm just saying. You're just saying what? Lena's father, Marcus Williams, rose from his seat. That our children are disposable? That 6 kids can just disappear and we should accept your theories about them running away? The room erupted in angry voices. Morrison had seen enough. He slipped out the back door and found himself face to face with Micah Roy, sitting alone on the community center steps. Micah had taught at Brantford Bay High for 37 years before retiring 5 years ago. He'd been Malik's English teacher, Lena's debate coach, and Andre's mentor in the drama club. If anyone understood these kids, it was him. Hell of a meeting, Morrison said, settling beside the older man. Hell of a situation, Micah replied. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd watched too many young lives cut short. Those parents deserve better than theories and whispers. The case isn't closed. We're still investigating. Micah turned to look at him directly. At 68, he still had the sharp eyes of a teacher who could spot trouble from across a classroom. "Ray, with all due respect, you're investigating the wrong things." "What do you mean?" "You're looking for where they went. Maybe you should be looking at how they got there." Micah stood up, brushing dust from his pants. "I taught those kids. They weren't risk takers. They were careful, responsible. If they got on a boat that night, someone they trusted put them on it." Morrison watched as the older man walked toward his car, then called out, "Micah, if you know something." "I don't know anything yet," Micah replied. "But I'm going to find out." The next morning, Morrison arrived at the station to find Micah waiting in the lobby with a manila folder under his arm. "I spent the night at the dock," Micah said without preamble. "Talked to every boat owner, every dock hand, every person who had access to that area on July 15th. And most people were helpful. But there's an old analog logbook at the harbor master's office. Manual backup system from the 80s that nobody pays attention to anymore." Micah opened his folder and pulled out photocopied pages. "Guess what I found logged for the night of July 15th? Morrison leaned forward, scanning the handwritten entries. Most were routine: fishing boats returning, pleasure craft docking for the night. But there, at the bottom of the page, was an entry that made his blood run cold. Ferry crossing. 12:30 a.m. 7 passengers. Destination, Old Harbor Point. And at the bottom, a signature, W. Lorne. 7 passengers, Morrison said quietly. But there were only 6 kids. Micah nodded grimly. "That's what I thought too. Until I realized we've been asking the wrong question all along. Which is? Not where they went, Ray. Who took them there?" The name, W. Lorne, led them to a dead end faster than Morrison expected. No record in the town registry, no driver's license, no social security number. It was as if the person simply didn't exist. But boats don't operate themselves, and 7 people don't just vanish into thin air. Micah had a different approach. While Morrison ran the name through databases, the retired teacher did what he did best: he talked to people. 3 days of conversations at the diner, the post office, and the marina finally paid off when old Martha Prescott mentioned seeing Jonas Pelham cleaning a boat that Tuesday morning, July 16th. "Jonas?" Morrison frowned when Micah called him. "That guy's been working the docks for 20 years. Never caused any trouble. Maybe that's exactly why we should talk to him," Micah replied. They found Jonas Pelham at the marina, mending nets in the afternoon sun. At 58, he had the weathered look of someone who'd spent his life by the water. His hands were steady as he worked, but when Morrison and Micah approached, something flickered in his eyes. "Jonas," Morrison called out. "Got a minute?" "Always got time for the law," Jonas replied, but he didn't stop working on the nets. "What can I do for you?" "We're following up on the night those kids disappeared. July 15th. You remember anything unusual happening around the docks?" Jonas shook his head slowly. "Told you guys this months ago. Nothing out of the ordinary. Most boats were tied up by sunset." Micah stepped forward. "Jonas, I taught those kids. They were good kids, responsible. If they got on a boat that night, someone they trusted helped them. Don't know what you're getting at." Morrison pulled out the photocopied log page. "This shows a ferry crossing at 12:30 a.m. that night. 7 passengers to Old Harbor Point. You know anything about that?" For the first time, Jonas stopped working. His fingers tightened around the net, and when he looked up, the easy confidence was gone. "Where'd you get that?" "Does it matter?" Micah asked gently. "Jonas, those families deserve to know what happened to their children." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the gentle lapping of water against the dock pilings. Jonas set down his tools and wiped his hands on an old rag, buying himself time to think. "I might have taken some kids across that night," he said finally. "Sometimes people ask for rides after hours. Nothing official, just helping folks out." "6 kids?" Morrison pressed. "Yeah, 6 kids. They wanted to see the old boardwalk one more time before college. Seemed harmless enough. Jonas's voice was steady, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool breeze. You dropped them off safely? Course I did. Left them at Old Harbor Point around 1 a.m. They said they had a ride coming to pick them up. Jonas shrugged. Never saw them again after that. Micah pulled out a pen and notepad. Can you describe them? Just so we know we're talking about the same group. Jonas rattled off descriptions that matched the 6 missing teens perfectly. Too perfectly, Morrison thought. As if he'd memorized their details from news reports rather than a brief boat ride in the dark. One more thing, Micah said casually. The log shows 7 passengers. Who was the 7th? The change in Jonas was immediate. His shoulders tensed, and his eyes darted toward his boat as if calculating escape routes. Must be a mistake in the log. I only took 6 kids. The signature says W. Lorne, Morrison added, watching Jonas's reaction carefully. The older man's face went pale. He stood up abruptly, knocking over his tackle box. I don't know anything about that name. Jonas. I said I don't know. The outburst surprised all 3 men. Jonas quickly composed himself, but the damage was done. Look, I took 6 kids across the bay. That's all I know. Now if you'll excuse me, I got work to do. As they walked back toward Morrison's patrol car, Micah was quiet until they were out of earshot. He's lying, the teacher said simply. About what part? All of it. That man knows exactly who W. Lorne is, and he knows what happened to those kids. Micah stopped walking. Ray, I need to ask you something. Have there been other disappearances? Kids going missing from this area over the years? Morrison thought about it. Nothing this big. Maybe a runaway here and there, but not runaways. Groups of kids. Maybe smaller groups, so nobody connected the dots. That evening, Morrison stayed late at the station, pulling files going back 15 years. By midnight, he had his answer. 3 other incidents. Always teenagers, always in groups of 2 or 3, always last seen near the waterfront. The cases had been written off as runaways or accidents, filed away and forgotten. But there was something else. In the file from 1991, he found a report about 4 local teens who'd gone missing after a beach party. The investigating officer had noted one witness who claimed to see them getting on a boat, but the witness disappeared before giving a full statement. The witness's name was listed as W. Lorne. Morrison reached for his phone to call Micah, then stopped. Outside his office window, the marina was dark except for a single light on Jonas Pelham's boat. As he watched, the light went out, and a figure moved across the deck. By morning, Jonas Pelham was gone. His boat was still tied to the dock, but the man himself had vanished as completely as the 6 teenagers he claimed to have helped. In his empty cabin, Morrison found a handwritten note tucked under a coffee mug. It always ends here. Old Harbor Point looked nothing like the bustling boardwalk the 6 friends remembered from their childhood. What had once been a thriving family destination now stood as a collection of weathered buildings and rusted carnival rides, slowly being reclaimed by salt air and time. The wooden planks of the old pier sagged under their own weight, and weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement. Morrison, Micah, and the families arrived together on a gray Thursday morning, exactly 12 weeks and 2 days after the disappearance. Patricia Thompson clutched her husband's arm as they walked across the cracked asphalt parking lot. Lena's parents followed close behind, while Tasha's mother carried a bouquet of yellow flowers, her daughter's favorite color. This place is a lot different than I remember, Marcus Williams said quietly, his voice carrying across the empty space. Bria's father, Carlos Santos, pointed toward a faded sign hanging at an odd angle. Luna's funnel cakes. Bria always talked about coming back here someday. His wife squeezed his hand, tears threatening to spill over. The search began methodically. Morrison coordinated with 2 additional officers while the families spread out across the abandoned boardwalk. They were looking for anything, a piece of clothing, a phone, any sign that the 6 teenagers had actually made it to this desolate place. It was Dion's younger sister, Maya, who found the first clue. She'd been reluctant to come, but her parents insisted the family needed to see this place together. While the adults searched the main buildings, Maya wandered toward an old wooden structure that might have once housed a gift shop. "Mom!" Her voice cut through the morning air. "Mom, come here!" On the weathered siding of the building, carved into the wood with what looked like a pocket knife, were the words, "Malik was here, last stop before the real world." The handwriting was unmistakably his, the same careful script that had filled countless homework assignments and thank you notes. Patricia Thompson ran her fingers over the carved letters, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He was here. He was really here. The discovery energized the search. If Malik had left a message, there might be other signs. Micah coordinated the effort like the teacher he'd always been, assigning each family a section and asking them to look for anything personal, anything that belonged to their children. 20 minutes later, Lena's mother called out from near the old pier. Tied around a piece of driftwood that had been driven upright into the sand was a bright purple scarf, the same one Lena had worn to graduation, the same one she'd been wearing in the last photo her friends posted on social media. "She always said this scarf was her good luck charm," Marcus Williams whispered, carefully untying the fabric. It was damp from the ocean spray but intact, as if it had been placed there recently rather than left for months. But it was Andre's discovery that sent chills through the entire group. Behind what had once been a game booth, partially buried in the sand, was a disposable camera still in its waterproof case. The kind teenagers bought for beach trips when they wanted pictures that felt more permanent than phone photos. Morrison carefully extracted the camera and examined it. "This could have been here for years," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No," said Tasha's mother, Denise Rivers. "Look at the expiration date on the film. June 2024. This camera is new." Back in town, Morrison rushed the film to the only photo lab still operating in the county. The water damage was extensive, but the lab technician managed to save 3 images. The first 2 were completely ruined, showing only abstract swirls of color and shadow. But the third photograph was partially visible. 6 figures stood together on what looked like the old Harbor Point pier, their faces illuminated by the flash. Even through the water damage and discoloration, Morrison could make out Malik's backward baseball cap, Lena's bright smile, Bria's yellow dress. They were all there, all 6 of them, arms around each other's shoulders. But at the edge of the frame, barely visible, was something that made Morrison's blood run cold. A 7th figure, just a hand and part of an arm reaching into the photo from outside the frame. Adult-sized, wearing what looked like a dark jacket or hoodie. Someone else was there, Micah said quietly as they studied the photograph under a magnifying glass. Someone took this picture, or someone else was in the group. Morrison pointed to the timestamp printed at the bottom of the photo, 1:23 a.m., July 16th. This was taken almost an hour after Jonas says he dropped them off. That evening, as the families drove home in heavy silence, Morrison received a call from the Coast Guard. A lobster boat had found something washed up on a small island 15 miles north of Old Harbor Point. A cell phone in a waterproof case, still functional. The phone belonged to Bria Santos. When Morrison turned it on, he found dozens of unread messages from worried friends and family. But buried in the phone's memory was something else, a video file dated July 15th at 11:47 p.m., exactly 1 hour before the teenagers' phones had gone silent. The video was dark and shaky, clearly shot on the ferry during their crossing. Morrison could hear the teens laughing and talking, their voices carrying over the sound of the boat's engine. The camera panned across their faces, Malik making rabbit ears behind Tasha's head, Lena and Andre singing off-key to some song, Dion sketching even in the boat's dim light. But at the end of the video, just before it cut off, Morrison heard something that made him replay the file 3 more times. Bria's voice, clear and surprised. "Wait, you're coming too? I thought you said you weren't gonna." Then the screen went black. Morrison stared at the blank phone screen, his mind racing. Someone else had been on that boat. Someone the kids knew well enough to be surprised by their presence. Someone who had convinced 6 smart, careful teenagers to trust them on a midnight ferry ride to an abandoned boardwalk. Someone who had been planning this for a very long time. Outside his office window, Brantford Bay looked peaceful under the evening stars. But Morrison knew that somewhere out there, a predator was still walking free, still using the name W. Lorne, still waiting for the next group of unsuspecting victims. Micah Roy had spent 40 years reading between the lines, first as a teacher deciphering troubled students' essays, then as a man trying to solve the mystery that had consumed his retirement. The recovered phone video played on his laptop for the 15th time as he sat in his home office, surrounded by newspaper clippings, police reports, and a timeline that stretched back 5 decades. The name, W. Lorne, wasn't random. It appeared too consistently, too deliberately across the years. Micah had started with the 1991 case Morrison mentioned, but his research had taken him much deeper into Brantford Bay's buried history. 1974. 2 teenage couples disappeared after a beach bonfire. A witness reported seeing them board a small boat with someone they called Will. The witness was listed as W. Lorne, but vanished before police could interview them. 1982. 3 high school students went missing during spring break. Their car was found at the marina. A boat rental form was signed by W. Lorne, but the name matched no local records. 1991. 4 teens disappeared after a graduation party. One survivor, who escaped and ran home, told police a man named Walter had offered them a ride to somewhere special. The reporting officer noted the similarity to previous cases but was transferred to another district before following up. 1998. A group of college students visiting for the summer vanished during a camping trip. Their last known location was Old Harbor Point. A ferry manifest showed W. Lorne as the boat operator. 2003. 2 teenage brothers went missing while fishing. Their boat was found empty near Old Harbor Point. A witness reported seeing them talking to an older man who introduced himself as Will Lorne. The pattern was unmistakable. Every 8 to 10 years, like clockwork, young people disappeared from Brantford Bay. Always in groups, always near the water, always with W. Lorne somewhere in the documentation. But the name itself was a ghost, appearing just long enough to muddy the investigation, then disappearing without a trace. Micah pulled up the town's employment records, cross-referencing everyone who'd had access to boats, docks, or maritime transportation over the past 50 years. The list was shorter than expected in a small coastal town where the same families had worked the water for generations. Then he saw it. William Lorne. Not W. Lorne, but close enough. Employed by the Brantford Bay Harbor Authority from 1972 to 1987. After that, a gap in the records until 1995, when a Will Lorne was listed as a part-time ferry operator. Then again in 2001 as Walter Lorne, working dock maintenance. Each time, the employment lasted just long enough to gain access, then ended abruptly after each incident. But the real revelation came when Micah found the Harbor Authority's old personnel files in the town hall basement. William Lorne's employee photo from 1972 showed a young man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. The kind of face that inspired trust, especially in young people looking for adventure. Micah compared the photo to more recent images he'd gathered from town events and community newsletters. The face had aged, the hair had grayed, but the eyes remained the same. William Lorne was still in Brantford Bay, still part of the community, still trusted by teenagers and their families. Because he was their high school guidance counselor. The realization hit Micah like a physical blow. David Brennan, Mr. Brennan to thousands of students over the past 30 years, was W. Lorne. The man who helped kids plan their futures, who listened to their problems, who knew their schedules and their dreams. The man who would know exactly when a group of graduating seniors might be vulnerable to suggestion, ready for one last adventure before college. Micah's hands shook as he reached for his phone to call Morrison, but it rang before he could dial. "Micah?" The voice was familiar, warm, concerned. "It's David Brennan. I heard you've been asking questions around town about the missing students." Micah's mouth went dry. "David, Yes, I've been investigating. I think we should talk. I may have some information that could help. Why don't you come by my office tonight? I'll be here late, grading summer school applications. The line went quiet except for the sound of Micah's heartbeat thundering in his ears. David Brennan knew. Somehow, he knew that Micah had figured it out. I'll be right there, Micah said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. Wonderful. Use the side entrance. It's easier than going through the main lobby. And Micah? Come alone. Some conversations are better kept private until we know what we're dealing with. After hanging up, Micah sat in his study for a long moment, staring at the evidence spread across his desk. 50 years of careful manipulation, of gaining trust and exploiting it. 6 beautiful young people who'd had their whole lives ahead of them, gone because they trusted the wrong adult. He thought about calling Morrison, about waiting for backup, about following protocol. But then he thought about Patricia Thompson's tears, about Marcus Williams' desperate hope, about 6 families who deserved answers. Micah Roy had spent his career protecting young people. Tonight, he would do it one more time. He grabbed his car keys and headed for Brantford Bay High School, not knowing that David Brennan was already preparing for their final conversation, the one that would end exactly where all the others had, at Old Harbor Point, where the truth went to die along with everyone who discovered it. The high school felt different at night. Micah had walked these halls for 37 years, but in the darkness, familiar spaces became foreign territory. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down empty corridors as he made his way toward the guidance office, his footsteps echoing against polished floors. David Brennan's office door stood slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Micah could see his former colleague sitting behind his desk, papers spread before him like always. For a moment, it was almost possible to believe this was just another late evening consultation about a student's future. Micah, thank you for coming. Brennan looked up with the same gentle smile that had comforted thousands of teenagers over the years. Please sit down. We have a lot to discuss. Micah remained standing near the door. I know who you are, David. I know what you've been doing. Brennan's expression didn't change. If anything, he seemed relieved. I wondered how long it would take someone to connect the dots. You always were the smartest teacher in this building. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why them? Why any of them? You spent your career in the classroom, Micah. You know how it feels to watch bright young minds prepare to leave, to spread their wings and fly away from everything you've given them. Brennan leaned back in his chair, his voice taking on the patient tone he used with struggling students. I've watched generations of kids walk through these doors, full of promise and potential. And then they graduate, and they're gone forever. So you made sure they'd never leave. I gave them something better than college, better than careers, better than the disappointment that comes with growing up. I gave them a perfect moment, suspended in time. They'll never have to worry about failure or heartbreak or growing old. Micah felt sick. You finished them. I preserved them. Brennan stood up slowly, moving toward a filing cabinet. Do you know what Malik was most afraid of? Failing at Georgia Tech. His scholarship was everything to his family, and the pressure was eating him alive. Lena was terrified that college would change her, that she'd lose touch with who she really was. Bria worried that community college meant she wasn't as smart as her friends. They deserved the chance to find out. They deserved better than disappointment. Brennan opened the filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. I have counseling notes going back decades, Micah. Hopes and dreams and fears, all carefully documented. I knew exactly when each group was ready, when they were vulnerable enough to trust me with one last adventure. The folder hit the desk with a heavy thud. Inside, Micah could see photographs, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes spanning 50 years. A collection of trophies from a lifetime of manipulation. The 1991 group, they were so excited about that beach party. 4 kids who felt left out, forgotten by their classmates. I offered them something special, a secret trip to Old Harbor Point. They thought it was the adventure of a lifetime. What happened to them? What happened to all of them? Brennan's smile faltered for the first time. Old Harbor Point has caves, Micah. Underwater caves that fill with the tide. Quick and peaceful. They never suffered. The casual way he said it, as if he was discussing the weather, made Micah's vision blur with rage. You monster. I'm a preservationist. Those kids will never be forgotten, never become statistics, never fade into mediocrity. They'll always be 18, always be perfect, always be remembered exactly as they were. Micah backed toward the door, but Brennan was already moving, blocking his path with surprising agility for a man in his 60s. You can't leave now, Micah. Not when you finally understand. Brennan's voice remained calm, but his eyes had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cold and empty. You've been asking too many questions, getting too close to the truth. People know where I am. Do they? You came alone, just like I suggested. And unfortunately, retired teachers have been known to have accidents. Heart attacks, falls downstairs. Very sad, but these things happen. Micah's phone buzzed in his pocket. A text message. Without thinking, he glanced down at the screen. From Morrison. Got your message about Brennan. Back up on the way. Keep him talking. Micah's confusion must have shown on his face because Brennan laughed. You didn't send a message to Detective Morrison, did you? But someone did. The office door swung open wider, and Bria Santos stepped into the room. She was thinner than in her graduation photos. Her clothes were torn and dirty, but she was alive. Behind her came Malik, then Lena, then the others. All 6 of them, moving with the careful steps of people who'd spent months hiding in caves and abandoned buildings. We've been waiting for someone to figure it out, Bria said, her voice hoarse but determined. Waiting for someone smart enough to track down the truth. Brennan's face went white. That's impossible. You're finished. I saw you go into the caves. You saw us go into the caves, Malik said. You didn't see us come out the other side. Old Harbor Point has more than one entrance, Mr. Brennan. We found the back way out. We've been living rough, staying hidden, gathering evidence, Tasha added. Waiting for the right moment to come home. Lena held up her phone. We've been recording everything since you started talking. Every confession, every detail about the others you finished. In the distance, sirens wailed through the night air, growing closer. Brennan slumped against his desk, the reality finally sinking in. 50 years of careful planning, undone by 6 teenagers who were smarter and more resourceful than he'd ever imagined. How? He whispered. You taught us well, Mr. Brennan, Andre said with a sad smile. You taught us to always have a backup plan. As Morrison and his officers took Brennan away, Micah watched the 6 friends embrace their families in the school parking lot. They were different now, older in ways that had nothing to do with time, but they were alive. They were home. On the memorial bench near the beach, someone had indeed scratched the words, W. Lorne Waits. But underneath, in fresher carving, someone had added, Not anymore.